Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't been here before, I'm Jamie. I read a ton of books, this year more so than ever. Having seen quite a few videos at this point that are like the halfway point favorite books of the year, I probably should do one of those actually, because I'm going to have a lot of books to wrap up at the end of the year, and picking my favorites is just going to be that much harder if I don't start looking at that now. So, I've come up with some lists. They're actually lists. I don't have a script, but they're books on a list. Which is so much more than I usually have written down for a video. I haven't decided if I need to start scripting, but I don't think I'd follow a script, to be honest. I think I'd write it all out and then I'd do something else anyway. So first I'm going to show off a thing that was kind of my best crochet project of the year. Because this is something I've been working on during some sprints. And I took some still pictures of it, but it didn't quite do it justice. This is my virus shawl in cotton thread. So you can see the algorithm here. I did a pink strand and then white and the variegated, I think, goldenrod or marigold color. I don't remember what they call it. So, and I still need to figure out a better technique for doing the edges, because cotton thread does not have as much squish to it as your typical yarn. So when you're trying to work ends in, they're really not staying put quite as nicely in thread with the techniques I usually use, especially like working in the ends along the edges. So anyway, so that's the shawl I finished. For folks that maybe have seen the stills that I left in Nicole at Dusty Book Sniffers Discord, I did put some pictures in there when it was finished, once I got it back from the fair. But it turned out really nice. I'm definitely working on another one. Anyway, so non-bookish kind of mid-year check-in. That's definitely one of the better crochet projects I've finished this year. I've been doing a lot of Granny Square charity blankets, which are nice and will be really pleasant for the people that receive them, but they're not really technical challenges or anything. Which is also why it was so hard to find projects to put in the fair this year, because most of my projects have not been things that I made by myself. The Granny Square blankets, somebody else makes the squares, and I put them together. So, anyway, now let's get to the books. I've finished well over 300 books so far this year, which is why this is a necessary video. I'm also trying a different location in the room I always record in, so I'm right underneath the overhead light, which means I'm a little bit less ghostly, spectral looking, but it's awkward, and I'm sitting on the floor with a box that the computer's sitting on. Not exactly my idea of a great setup, but for now, we'll see how it goes. So, it'll be a little bit of experimentation from now until, I figure out a good one. I'll probably be looking at getting some more lamps and being able to change the lighting around so that it's actually on my face, because where I usually sit, the light is always behind me, which is annoying. Anyway, I went through my books that I finished so far this year and only looked at the 5-star books. So on Goodreads, the books that I was looking in to make these lists are just the books that on Goodreads got 5 stars. These include books that on Storygraph would get 4.5 or higher. So they're not all strictly 5-star if you have half-star and quarter-star ratings. But they're all the best books I've read so far this year. 126 books on Goodreads that got 5 stars. So again, a lot of those got 4.75 stars, which on Goodreads is close enough to a 5 that it's a 5. Or 4.5 stars that were good enough to round up. But on Goodreads, I tend to be a little bit more generous just because there's only 5 stars. And a 4-star really does mean it's not quite as good in the Goodreads system as, as I would think it would be. 3 stars should be, it's okay, it's fine. But the way the culture of Goodreads is, 3 stars is almost punitive. It's quite a bit different. So, anyway, among these, I came up with my 12 favorite nonfiction books for this year so far. Not in any particular order. I will put all of the books in the description so you guys can see what they are and if they're not published yet, when their publication date will be. Because I have read quite a few ARCs this year, and I do look in the nonfiction section in NetGalley for my ARCs as well. So some of these have not come out yet or have just recently come out. I'll put their publication dates in the description if they're not already out. So the last one I actually read was Outlive by Peter Attia. This one is a health and wellness book that summarizes a whole bunch of modern science and understanding of how our bodies work, and some interesting findings about what we should be doing to keep ourselves alive longer in a healthy state. So not just living longer, but having a longer lifespan where we feel good. So a longer health span. And one of the takeaways in here involves eating more protein, which is, definitely something I've been incorporating a lot more. And doing more exercises, including more resistance training or, weightlifting. With my hands, that gets tricky. So I'm now exploring different ways of doing different muscle group resistance training that doesn't involve picking up weights with your grip, because I don't have one. So that's going to be fun. But yeah, Peter Attia is someone that's been a guest speaker on several health and wellness channels that I follow. So I was pleased to read his book, and it's definitely worth reading even if you've seen him on different episodes or shows or whatever. It's about almost 500 pages, but there's a lot of information in it. Then we have Between Two Sounds, Arvo Pärt, Journey to His Musical Language. This is by Joonas, Sildre, probably Sildre. This one is a graphic nonfiction, so graphic biography, basically, about a musician. And I looked up his music and listened to the music while I was reading part of this book, and then for quite a while afterwards. Really pretty stuff. Definitely something that I will be listening to more. I had never really heard of Arvo Pärt, but I like his music, so that was fun. And this is a graphic novel that I read as an ARC. I don't know offhand when it was or will be published. That'll be in the description. But a really creative way to tell a biography about a creative person. I definitely appreciated this one. The art isn't just decoration for the text. The art is part of telling the story, and it's really interesting. So definitely worth checking out if you like art or music or biographies or graphic novel type things that are more than just comic books. So yeah, that one is fun. The Great River The Making and Unmaking of the Mississippi by Boyce Upholt. My handwriting is atrocious, apparently, in full light. This one is about the Mississippi and follows kind of the natural history of that river, from human prehistory all the way to the present. The critters that lived along the Mississippi, how the Mississippi began in the first place, where it comes from, who lived along it, and how did they live from the very beginning of humans living along the Mississippi, and all the interactions between humans and this massive river. Really interesting, and I liked the modern chapters for all the technology that goes into like flood management and keeping the water from being disgusting. There's so much going on in managing the Mississippi, and when it floods, the reason it floods and the reason it doesn't flood as bad as it could, and where it floods, all this stuff. It's fascinating. So definitely recommended. That was also an ARC. I will put the publication date in the description. We have Knife, Meditations After an Attempted Murder by Salman Rushdie. This one I've seen in several other people's videos, so I'm not the only one who really liked this book. It's a memoir about Rushdie's surviving a knife attack that I had not heard about this until I read his book. Real story. He very nearly died a couple years ago. Not too many years ago, actually. Post-COVID, for that matter. And this is one of those things like, I can't imagine. I did not hear about this, but I did not hear about this. But I'm glad he survived. And he wrote a really good book that sort of contemplates what it means to survive and what do you do after you've been attacked? How do you come to terms with this? What do you do next? All this kind of stuff. It was a really good book. Definitely the sort of book that if I was dealing with PTSD sort of issues, he has a lot of insight from surviving something that, impactful and horrific, and finding ways to move on. So I really found that one a good book. And that one is out. That one I actually listened to as an audiobook from my library. So the audiobook is available, and is very good. And the print book, I would imagine, is also really good, but I have not actually held it in my hand yet. So then we have The Secret History of Sharks, The Rise of the Ocean's Most Fearsome Predator. Oh my gosh. I used to have such beautiful handwriting too. This is very sad. By John Long. Anyway, this one was also an ARC. I gave it 5 stars, even though as an ARC it did not have most of its pictures in it. And I think it would have been a much easier and more automatic 5-star if it had the pictures in it. It's one of the grumbles I always have when I'm reading nonfiction ARCs, that you don't always get to see the graphics that go into the storytelling around the text. And sometimes it's tricky reviewing the book when all you have is the print, not the pictures. I ran into this when I was trying to read and review one on vultures a couple years ago, that I kind of know what vultures look like, but they're talking about all the different vultures of the world. I don't know what each one looks like, and sometimes there aren't really good pictures of them already online. So Googling pictures to go along with reading the ARC does not always work. So, yeah. Thankfully, I follow a lot of deep sea dives and watch a lot of the dive footage that's being beamed back by the ROVs and live streams. So I've actually seen footage of a lot of the sharks they were talking about from live streams. So that helped. But I would imagine this is a lot more fun with pictures. Hopefully it has a lot of pictures. There was a lot of gaps anyway where I think there's pictures that go there. But a lot of really good information. This is one where if I find a copy somewhere that I can afford it, I will probably get myself a copy because that was a fun book. And I spent a lot of time on sprints talking to people about the sharks as I was reading it. So a lot of people got to explore sharks with me through my comments. Very good book. Then we have Killing Lincoln, The Shocking Assassination That Changed America Forever by Bill O'Reilly. This one was interesting. I haven't read a lot of Bill O'Reilly's histories yet, but I plan to. This one I found particularly amusing because of the shocking state of haphazardness to go with presidential security in President Lincoln's time. It's surprising that Lincoln hadn't already been assassinated with how bad their security was. So that was interesting. And if you compare what was possible then with the way our security works now, it's highly unlikely that the same kind of assassination could work now. It still might happen. Early days, we've only had a few assassinations so far in our history, so you never know which one's going to work next. But it's going to be a lot harder than it was for Lincoln. So that was my takeaway from that book. It's just, how did presidents survive with all the enemies that they are guaranteed to create by being president and making decisions people don't all like? I think that's one of the things that assassination changed, was making people realize that we kind of need security services protecting the president if they're going to be able to function as a president. Anyway, it was a good book, and not very long chapters. It felt more like the pacing of a thriller, so short chapters, lots of action, not too much deep insight, but still, telling the story in a way that's, absorbing. So hopefully that's what the rest of his books are like, because I think I have 2 or 3 more on my shelves. And we have this Blended in the Vial, a saga of Churchill, family, and defiance during the Blitz by Eric Larson, another big name in nonfiction. This one, I had it in print, and then I also listened to it as an audiobook. And I loved the audiobook. I mentioned this in the video for that week as well. At the end of the audiobook, they've talked about Churchill's speech that, made a big impact on everybody that listened to it. And then they played the radio broadcast of that speech at the end of the book. So because it's an audiobook, that I was listening to, they can do that mixed media where they actually tie in the actual radio. So you're not just reading the text, you're actually listening to Churchill giving that speech. So I liked that. I always get tickled by audiobooks that make great use of the fact that they're audio format. So that was fun. And it's a surprisingly approachable history biography, despite the fact that it's pretty long and takes on a lot of stuff that, as an American, I'm an American who, when I was a little kid, wanted to grow up to be British. So I absorbed a lot more British history and British politics and everything than a lot of my friends. But it's still not something where we get a lot of that background just in general. I still have to look up who the prime minister is and stuff like that. Still, actually. But it was a really good one. And I think most readers will understand what they're reading, even if they're not really big Anglophiles. So, we have 20 Years of Growing by Maurice O'Sullivan. This is a book by somebody who grew up on a little island off the coast of Ireland, that was like a land that time forgot almost, where they're so isolated from the rest of society that their little culture could stay almost untouched through all these changes everyone else was experiencing, except that their population would dwindle over time to where eventually there was the last child on the island. And I think now there's a caretaker on the island. It's one of those spaces where while there were people on that island, they didn't have the technology and the pacing that we're used to in our lives. So it was an interesting memoir. I don't know when the last publication is of this one, because I read an older copy that I found on a free shelf. But it's a really cool book. And if you can find it through your library, do interlibrary loan or whatever, it's definitely one to read if you're looking for an interesting glimpse at life in old-timey Ireland. Very readable. And we have Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari. I did a video specifically on this one because so many people were interested in it when I was talking about it on Sprints. It was definitely fun. It was kind of a natural history of humans, the way you might read of the natural history of sharks or horses or, any other species. So that was fun. And then Under the Banner of Heaven, A Story of Violent Faith by John Krakauer. A disturbing society. Oh my goodness. There are parts of the world I'm glad I did not get born into. This is one of them. And it's not that far away, and I know people that are tangentially connected to the society that's in this book. Looking at the more hardcore Mormon communities that are still marrying lots of wives and having babies with closely related women that may or may not have any capacity for consent, especially since they're nowhere near old enough. And if that kind of stuff bothers you, this is the sort of nonfiction book that deserves the whole page of trigger warnings. Do not read it if those kinds of things are gonna bug you, unless you're reading it with a group where you can talk about it, because it is disturbing. But a really good book and a really good piece of journalistic writing. And we have The Talented Mrs. Mandelbaum, The Rise and Fall of an American Crime Boss by Margalit Fox. This one I talked about in a bit more detail as well in one of my videos. I loved it. I had never heard before about an American woman crime boss, and she was active for decades before she got caught. So she was a big-time crime boss, very successful, had a great life, and definitely a fun book. And last but not least, What the Wild Seas Can Be by Helen Scales. This is one that I read recently as well. It was nice because it didn't just give you negatives about everything that's going wrong about the oceans. It also gives things that are going right, things that we're doing that are improving things, or technologies that are ways forward to, correct our mistakes, or, fix imbalances, whatever it is. I really like that, because so many books in that vein of nonfiction are just, the world is coming to an end, it's terrible. We've done some really crappy things to our oceans. We're going to have to live with the consequences. Here are some of the consequences. Here are some of the things we can do about it to keep it from getting worse. Here are some of the things we can do to keep it, moving in the right direction towards getting better. So I liked that. So I only read 2 short story collections that ended up in the 5-star category on Goodreads. So I only have 2 short story collections on my list. 11 by Patricia Highsmith. I really liked this collection. I've liked her novel-length writing a lot, but I seem to really, really like her short stories too. So I'm going to have to look up some more of her short stories. And then The Cursed Carnival and Other Calamities. New Stories About Mythic Heroes by Rick Riordan. I think it's Riordan? Half of everybody I talk to in my region says Riordan, but I'm guessing it's Riordan. What do you guys think? How do you pronounce this guy's name? I think I might have even heard it both ways on audiobooks, so it's very confusing. But this one, I actually listened to as an audiobook even, so I should know how to say his name. Anyway, this is actually not just Rick Riordan's writing. It's a bunch of short stories by a bunch of different authors along the same lines as Percy Jackson and the Apollo stories and the Kane Chronicles and what's that other one? The one that's in the anyway. All of those stories have some sort of a human, usually a kid or young adult, that is dealing with the gods in their respective pantheon. So in this book, each story is set in a different pantheon and involves other young people that are dealing with those gods or godlike creatures. So if you've wondered what the Aztec version of Percy Jackson would look like, I think there actually is one for Aztec. But there's one for quite a few different cultural myth systems or religious systems. So really cool. A lot more fun than I expected. I actually pulled it up because it worked really well for a prompt in a readathon, not because I actually knew what I was getting into. So that was a pleasant surprise. So I'm going to kind of just talk through the 15 fiction books without spending too much time on each one, because I'm going to try and keep this video under 40 minutes. Let's see if we can do this. So number 1, Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Bolle. This is young adult, following a Native American girl and her classmates and the things that they're dealing with, especially with drug distribution and discrimination and stuff like that. Really good. Kind of long. Audiobook is really good. Woman at 1000 Degrees by Helgamer Helgeson. Yes. This is one of the books I read early in the year that I already knew was going to be in my top books of the year. Still is. Hasn't been knocked off yet. Really good literary fiction. About it's a woman looking back on her life. She was a lot more active in kind of resistance sort of stuff during World War II. And her kids don't see her like that. She's a little old lady, and how could she possibly be that kind of person? So it's kind of juxtaposing who she was when she was younger and who she is now. And yeah, it's a good book. A Suspension of Mercy by Patricia Highsmith. This is probably my favorite Highsmith novel so far, in which a guy and his wife are not getting along all that well. And he's trying to write a novel, and she's fed up with him because he's just obsessed with this novel. It's not getting written. And somehow they land on this bit of dialogue as she's leaving about, that he should pretend like she's died and write a story as if he's killed her. So he does. And he kind of acts out bits of what it would be if he had murdered his wife. Meanwhile, she's gone on a vacation and has not told him where she's gone. And then the police show up to investigate her murder. It's a really fun one. Then we have The Garden of Evening Mists by Tan Tuan Eng. Lovely kind of historical fiction after World War II. Also involves older people looking back on their lives during the war, but a totally different place from Women at 1000 Degrees. We have Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. Not within my normal genres at all, but it was fun. And I will probably look for a print version of it because it was really cool. It really is like an IKEA catalog turned into a horror story. It was great. Then we have Babel by R.F. Kuang. Really long, really complicated, lots of language nerdy stuff, which I really enjoyed. I don't have a copy of my own, but I will. It was fun, and I will reread this book probably at some point when someone's like, hey, I'm reading Babel, anyone want a buddy read? I will probably buddy read it as a reread at some point. But not this year. So, and then A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This one was highly recommended by several people during several readathons, so I did get to it, and it was really good. It's probably not going to be in my top 10 of the year, but it's definitely in my top 15 up to this point in the year. And considering I've read 300 books plus this year, it's still a really good book. But really creative premise. A monk who's sort of seeking his place in the world, and a robot is kind of doing the same. It's great. The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This one was fun. This one might be staying on my list of great books at the end of the year. We'll see. I'm still not sure how isolated they really are, but it worked for an isolated setting in the readathon that I read it for. And it involves androids, and there is a murder, and yeah, it's kind of fun. Shanghai by Joseph Cannon. Probably not going to be on my list for the end of the year, but again, it made the cut for this list. The first Joseph Cannon book I've read, but I have several of his on my shelves that I will be getting to hopefully this year, because I did really enjoy that one. I also just like the setting of being in Shanghai, so that one might still be my top rated book by him, even after I've read more of them, just because I like that setting. Apartment Women by Gu Byung Mo. This book is probably going to be in my top 5, definitely in my top 10 for the year. This one was an ARC, so I will put the publication date for it in the description. See if there are any other ARCs so far. So far, no, that's the first one on my list that's an arc. Although the next one is also one that I did as an arc. So Apartment Women is looking at an experimental housing unit that's trying to create sort of communal living artificially. They're sticking people together and they're supposed to form into a community just spontaneously. Kind of exploring how these things happen or don't and why. And yeah, I won't tell you how it turns out, but it was definitely a fun book. And one that I might reread again, which means eventually I need to find a copy of it because it was an arc. An e-arc. I don't have it. And also then Familiaris by David Wroblewski. This one was probably the longest NetGalley arc that I've read this year, and I really enjoyed it. I have not read the story of Edgar Sawtelle yet. This is the follow-up to that book, but you don't need to have read it for it to make sense. But now that I've read Familiaris, I will be reading the story of Edgar Sawtelle for one of the readathons where length matters. I don't know which one that's going to be yet, but there will be one where it will fit, and I will definitely read it. It's long. But if it's anything like Familiaris, it's probably really good. So, definitely recommend it. I understand that a lot of my friends in BookTube have not read it yet because it is such a long arc. It is very long. Like not quite 1,000 pages kind of long. So, it will be a commitment, but it's worth it. Then we have The Phoenix and the Firebird by Alexis Korsiakov. This one is like a modern day fairy tale set in Russia and kind of Russia and China. So, Phoenix and Firebird. And it does have mythical creatures in it. So if you're looking for a book that fits a prompt involving mythical creatures, The Phoenix and the Firebird definitely works for that. I don't know what the publication date on it is because it was an arc, but I will put it in the description. It was really good. And not very long. So, Rise and Fall of Dodo by Neil Stephenson. I keep seeing it. I keep thinking I'm going to read it. I finally got to it this year. And while I've not enjoyed most of Stevenson's books that I've read this year, I actually really enjoyed The Rise and Fall of Dodo. It's a government agency that is bringing back magic using science. To the extent that it's actually name-dropping the Bose-Einstein condensate experiment as part of the technology that's leading to bringing back magic. So it's definitely kind of a hybrid. Alright. So, we have 3 more. We have Murder on the Interstellar Express by Gregory D. Little. This one's probably one of my favorite sci-fis this year. There's a murder in a spaceship. There are androids and aliens and a diabolical mastermind character. Really good. The ship's AI is a creative character. Interesting. Yes. And the ending, like the solution to this one, was something that cannot really happen outside sci-fi. So, yeah, it was a really good sci-fi take on a murder mystery. Yeah. And I don't know when that one's coming out. Oh, I might remember the date on this one because I looked it up recently. It might be August 13. I'm pretty sure. But it'll be in the description. You'll see if my memory worked on that one. But I have looked that one up recently. Then we have Ghost of the Neon Gods by T.R. Napper. This one was a novella-length sci-fi that had really good world building and lots of action and kind of one of those that's set in the slummy part of a high-tech future society. And something happens that propels them, the main characters, into traveling into parts of their society that they normally would never see. So we get to explore that society through the experiences of these rather hapless young people. It was fun, and it was actually a lot of stuff for the number of pages it took up. So definitely cool. And then we have The Delegate Dream Department Store by Mia Lee. This was another one I read more recently. I don't know when it came out, but it only popped up on my library feed really recently, so it's got to have come out fairly recently. And it was a lot of fun. Kind of a Korean take on Confidence Makers by somebody else. Which did not quite make my cut. But basically there's this kind of back end on reality that there are people that do jobs associated with providing you with dreams. And yeah, they have some shenanigans going on. And there's a new employee at the department store. So we're following this one character who's been hired on at the Dollar Get Dream department store and is learning the job and kind of learning about the department store and her job and what they're supposed to do and all that. So yeah, it's very creative, really fun, and not terribly long. That one I also did as an audiobook. So I don't know what the print book looks like. I've seen pictures, I think, of a pretty version of it, but I don't know for sure. But that one was a cool book. Yeah, so 42 minutes. It's not too far over. I guess we're okay. So yeah, those are my favorite books so far this year. So 15 fiction, 2 fiction short stories, and 12 nonfiction. So 29 books. All right. Well, I'm going to sign off and let you guys check out the books and drop comments if you've read the books on my list. Or let me know what your top books are so far this year. If you've made a video about your top books so far this year and I have not found it yet and commented on it, leave your information in the comments and I will check out your video. And hopefully the second half of the year will be as amazing as the first half. And we'll see what happens by the end of December. Hopefully you guys are having a great reading year, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, guys!